Good morning, boys and girls, and welcome once again to the southern wing of the Stink Bug Works. Yesterday I did more sanding on the dummy motor. I wasted a whole bunch of epoxy, and I still have some 3/4 ounce cloth I've got to put on the dummy motor. But my real reason for today's video is to try and help out Big B. Big B explained a theory. Actually, it's not a theory. It's more like one of the laws of radio control. And he was having a hard time convincing some people. People would say, "Oh, you don't know what the hell you're talking about." And he was using terms, and I understood exactly what he was talking about. But the terms he used could be easily confused. He was saying to get 100%, you got to have 150%, because if you only have 100%, then you're really only getting 67%. And people, that sounds confusing. I understood what he was saying. 100%, 150% on the radio is 100% on the speed control. Let's talk about radios. I think Big B sort of assumed everybody knows how a radio works. And from some of the responses, I don't think people really know how a radio works. So let's go into the real basics. This is a servo tester, and it has a knob that you turn, and it has a middle position and a position at this end and a position at that end. And on the dial, there are no percentage indications. It says 1 millisecond, 1.1 millisecond, 1.2 milliseconds, and on up to 2 milliseconds. Milliseconds of what? Well, here's the deal. This is what your transmitter transmits. It transmits a square wave. Now, what's a square wave? Well, we've all seen the sine wave that, kind of looks like, perfectly symmetric hills, one after a hill in a valley, where a square wave is just all this way, all that way, all this way, all that way. And these waves are broadcast at the speed of light. They're ridiculously fast. And what the receiver receives and transmits to the servo is the pulse width, the width of these waves. If you were to measure between the top of this one and the top of the next one as it travels, you could say that it takes 1 millisecond for this gap to travel, across a fixed point. And so that's what they use to talk to the servo, is that gap between the waves. And that gap is measured in time because the wave is moving. So as one gap hits, it's kind of like a moving saw, if you'd imagine that. So that's what it's broadcasting. Now, here's the deal. For all practical purposes, now there are differences between individual products, but for all practical purposes, 2 milliseconds is full blast in anything, be it a servo or a speed control or an electronic switch or anything. Now, you can go above 2 milliseconds, but it's not going to change the maximum output of the device. The device has a maximum output, and that usually occurs at 2 milliseconds. Conversely, it has a minimum output, and that occurs at 1 millisecond. And, it steps in between. It could be a little less than 1 millisecond, a little more, but in general and approximately. So these percentage numbers, those are just numbers that the manufacturer makes up. Whoever makes the transmitter says, okay, well, let's call 1.8 milliseconds 100%. And another manufacturer says, I'm going to call 1.9 milliseconds 100%. And another manufacturer says, I'm going to call 2 millimeters 100%. So that's what Big B was trying to say. The number that the manufacturer assigned to 150% on his radio equates to this many milliseconds. It's 150% of what? No one knows. It's just a way that manufacturer states 2 milliseconds. If he told you it was, the full throttle is 2 milliseconds, you'd be going, and what does that tell me? If he told you 150%, you'd know that. So that's what Big B is saying. It's not that 150% is equal to 60%. It's what this manufacturer refers to as 100% equates to this many milliseconds, which equates to this output in my ESC. And to get 2 milliseconds to my ESC, my radio has to be at 150. That's all that means. It's like having a number 11 on your dial. It doesn't go any louder. It just changes the spacing of the other 10 numbers. So, Big B, I hoped that helped explain it to those that didn't really grasp what you were trying to say. So until next time, boys and girls, jet out. Why don't I hear the little beep?